Dear Dr. Eberhard, thank you for allowing us to meet here in your practice in Lucerne for another episode of Thanatology Up to Date. We are once again discussing near-death experiences, but this time focusing on a particularly intriguing aspect: physicality. Many who have had near-death experiences report a sort of soul body, which they perceive as a vessel for their self. Others speak of dissolving physicality, of a kind of merging. The dying process invariably begins with an experience of separation. The physical body is left behind. Based on the accounts you're familiar with, how does this separation occur? How does it happen? And where does one exit their body?
In Western near-death experiences, the specific location of exit from the body is seldom detailed. This might be due to individuals not knowing or not being asked to describe it in detail. However, in certain cultures, the exit point is considered quite significant. Particularly in Polynesian near-death experiences, there are frequent mentions of the head, even the right eye, or the fontanel, the area of the skull that is not yet closed in infants, which plays a crucial role. Hans-Peter Dürr, an ethnologist and philosopher, not the quantum physicist, who has had his own near-death and out-of-body experiences, describes exiting through the fontanel, and even mentions observing a general type of connection there.
Does the soul or spirit, once detached from the body, possess a form of physicality? And if so, what does it look like?
Interestingly, experiences vary greatly. There are many near-death experiencers who even say, "I didn't have a proper body, I don't know what I was. Maybe some kind of mist between liquid and I was light." That exists too. Interestingly, they can then perform tasks that you would normally need a body for. It can be simultaneous. Someone describes, "No, I was some kind of mist." And then again, for example, I could touch or try to touch the people standing around who are still alive, still physically present. So then again, having some kind of physicality. Or eyes, then he sees something too. And then there are those who become more concrete and say, "I did have some kind of body, which was perhaps lighter, brighter." And then there are those who are even hyperphysical. They feel even more physicality real at that moment. A striking example is Howard Storm, who had a negative near-death experience and became very famous for his description. For example, he steps out of the body and experiences an enormous intensity of his body, absolutely tormented by pain. He had a perforated stomach, was really critically close, and then he steps out. He even describes the smell. He had this smell in his nose of urine, of a hospital smell, of linoleum floor, a bitter taste in his mouth. He could close his fist really well. It was all very present. He even heard his pulse beating, felt his breathing very intensely, and was extremely irritated that he was so present and so clear in his head, and can shout at everyone. They don't react. He can't get them to perceive him, who is so physical in any way. And he is even more irritated when he sees himself lying comatose in a bed and even considers, "Have they deceived me? Did they perhaps have a wax impression? This might be interesting." It could even be a key. Why did he perceive it so physically? Is it because he did not expect that he could have some kind of exit experience? Because for him, for his worldview, which he also makes very clear, it was absolutely inconceivable at that time. Does his body become denser as a result? Does this have such a consequence? One can only speculate.
Some reports describe a silver cord connecting the body to the soul. a concept that has been known for a long time. The Bible, for example, mentions the silver cord. What can be learned about this from the accounts of those who have had near-death experiences?
Such accounts are relatively rare, but they do exist. Individuals who have undergone near-death experiences report seeing this silver cord, which is invariably connected to the head or the fontanel, and occasionally to the heart, primarily in the upper body area. It is described as a cord or thread, often luminous and remarkably stretchable, and sometimes almost on the brink of tearing. There's an account where the person felt that continuing further would eventually cause his thread to break, indicating a condition for returning, as the distance seemed to have a limit. The concept of the silver cord, while more commonly found in ancient descriptions and traditions, does appear in modern accounts of near-death and, albeit rarely, out-of-body experiences.
In the context of near-death experiences, encounters with deceased people are often reported. What is the situation here with physicality? How do people who have separated from their physical bodies see otherworldly people?
Da spiegelt sich das eigentlich fast nochmal diese Variabilität. Also da gibt es Nahtoderfahrungen, wo...
The reflection mirrors the variability once more. In some near-death experiences, another being is perceived merely as a presence, without even a whisper, voice or physical form, yet one is certain of their identity. Then there are those who witness beings of light, sometimes merely orbs of light, or where the light morphs into a form or physicality up to a distinct corporeal presence. This brings us to the matter of attire. They are seldom seen unclothed. I am not aware of instances where they were naked. When clothed, the garments are either not precisely described or, as often reported in Western accounts of near-death experiences, are white long robes, remarkably common, or simply dressed in everyday attire.
There are indeed several reports of encounters with deceased individuals who are perceived as if they were in the prime of their life. A deceased grandfather, for example, is not seen as old and frail, but rather in the prime of his life. How does this relate to the age of those in the afterlife? Can a general statement be made about this?
Ja, das ist eine spannende Frage. Also diese Verjüngung.
Indeed, this inquiry delves into an intriguing aspect. The phenomenon of rejuvenation, or rather restoration, is quite prevalent. Individuals are recognized in a youthful, often enhanced beauty devoid of any prior infirmities, which invariably astonishes observers. It's noteworthy that some people, known throughout life solely in the context of a disability, are perceived without these limitations. Yet, what distinguishes Polynesian near-death experiences is precisely the absence of this pattern. The deceased are often perceived exactly as remembered, retaining their age, disabilities or youthful appearance. This, however, is a rarity. In the majority of instances, there appears to be an encounter with an idealized age, state of health, and beauty, provided they can be perceived with such clarity and detail.
Another question that indirectly relates to physicality: how is matter perceived in an out-of-body state?
In an out-of-body state, the perception of matter is notably impaired. Visually, perception remains quite acute, suggesting no issues with sight. Interestingly, one might even see through barriers such as walls, which physically offer no resistance or are not perceived at all. This aspect can be quite disconcerting. Consider Howard Storm, who attempted to physically interact with others, only to find it impossible, as his hands would typically pass through objects or people. Some individuals experiencing near-death report feeling a sort of gelatinous resistance, particularly when attempting to interact with humans, described as a brief electrical vibration. Following this disembodiment, ascending towards or even through ceilings is common. There are instances where the resistance of a ceiling is perceived as slightly porous, allowing passage yet still faintly detectable. A particularly intriguing area about which I can make no definitive statements is how those undergoing out-of-body experiences perceive others undergoing the same. Shared near-death experiences are exceedingly rare. An example includes a couple in an accident both experiencing an out-of-body state and observing each other in this new form. There's also an account of a group of firefighters trapped by fire, who experience a collective out-of-body state, see each other, and later share their experiences.
Und dann auch austreten und sich gegenseitig sehen und das nachher sich auch wiederum berichten konnten.
It raises questions about the nature of physical interaction in such states.
Also war dann der schon wieder normal in so einem Zustand, oder?
From a Polynesian near-death experience, it was noted with surprise that spirits could pass through each other.
Diese Jenseitigen auch durch einander hindurchgehen konnten.
Although this is uncommon. Generally, it appears that the otherworldly or out-of-body state possesses a form of physicality or subtleness distinct from our tangible material reality, allowing for perception yet enabling passage through material objects.
Is there a conclusion for you? What remains of a person after physical death? Some form of essence? Or indeed concretely a soul body as a vessel for the self?
From my idealistic perspective, which is a personal assessment, I believe in our survival and in a consciousness that does not extinguish with death. Given that many near-death experiences reflect this world in a way, often more beautifully, vividly, and intensely, we consistently find some kind of environment and personality remains. It would be odd if there were no physical aspect. It seems those who experience an absence of physicality during their near-death experiences might not yet perceive or experience this aspect due to a different current state of density that requires adjustment. However, I do not believe we remain as mere fog, as many near-death experiences contradict this, showing that physicality is indeed seen, experienced and recognized.
Thank you for summarizing these accounts and for sharing your personal viewpoint. Thank you, Dr. Eberhard, for the conversation.
Thank you likewise.